Welcome to Above Replacement Radio. I am your host, Chris Gianta. I might be becoming a bad baseball fan who can't enjoy the romantic things because of advanced statistics. 15 years from now, I want to be on the early baseball committee. Over there on the other side of the screen is Daniel Curran.
I literally have the Fangraphs hoodie, the baseball reference t-shirt, just repping some stats, you know what I'm saying?
It's not necessarily Hall of Fame. It's not necessarily above average, but we can guarantee you we are better than just the standard replacement level college sophomore.
And welcome to Above Replacement Radio. We're talking baseball kind of whenever. I'm your host, Chris Gianta. Over there on the other side of the screen is Daniel Curran. How you doing, Daniel?
Chris, I am doing very well today. We're back to like a legitimate 2 episodes a week, which feels very good. But we do have a lot to talk about, even though it's just been like 3 days since our last recording.
Yeah, usually every 3 days. Sometimes it's hard to scratch and claw for topics, but the baseball gods gave us a lot of different things to talk about, and
None of them good.
None of them good. None of them good. No, yeah, it's all bad stuff. But yeah, we do have some material for this episode, and the biggest news came on Wednesday night, I believe, or Wednesday or Thursday night, and Perry Manassian, Angels GM, announced that Shohei Ohtani could not pitch for the rest of the year, and that he had a tear in his UCL. Also, Mike Trout was going back on the IL, which is unfortunate for the Angels, obviously, but more unfortunate for the Angels and also Shohei Ohtani is he has a tear in his UCL and is no longer pitching for an indefinite amount of time. Hopefully, hoping for the best, but really unfortunate.
Yeah, UCL tear is probably the worst news that you can possibly get as a pitcher. That's usually the one that indicates Tommy John surgery. It doesn't always do that, but Tommy John surgery is quite literally a UCL replacement surgery. So any knowledge that is the problem is very concerning, to say the least. And that's obviously what we're experiencing here with Shohei Ohtani. He previously got Tommy John surgery in 2019, and he still hit that year. So it is promising that he can keep going to a degree, but yeah, I don't know. It's just the worst news. The worst part about it, there are a lot of worst parts about it. What the hell?
Yeah, there's nothing good out of this, and yeah, it really did surprise me that there was such an issue, because he got Tommy John surgery not very long ago, and yeah, usually when we're talking about like second Tommy John surgery of their career, not that it's been announced that Ohtani's getting one, but there's a possibility of it happening. But usually when you hear about second Tommy John surgery, it's like maybe a decade apart or something like that. Not the case here, unfortunately. Like if it does end up that he has to get it, that's 4 years in between, which is unfortunate. But I think part of the narrative here, and it's easy to point out, is like, hey, maybe this two-way thing is unsustainable. However, I think this might have just happened if he was never hitting at all. I think this could have possibly happened if he was just a pitcher, because of how hard he throws, and it's dangerous to throw baseballs in general, and especially when you're averaging like 96, 97 on your fastball. But yeah, I mean, I feel like this could have happened without him hitting, but I'm sure him hitting didn't necessarily help.
Yeah, I mean, Tommy John surgery and also just long-term elbow injuries and arm injuries are becoming kind of an epidemic in baseball now. I think more than it ever has been in its history. I mean, it feels like every couple of weeks, like couple times a month, we're getting reports about a pitcher needing Tommy John surgery. That was not the case beforehand. It was usually just like a select few guys a year. But yeah, I mean, we've had a lot of guys, even just like this year alone, like half the Rays starting rotation is getting Tommy John surgery. Dustin May is getting it again. Shohei might be getting it again. There's just an endless. Andrew Painter got it earlier this year. Yeah, I mean, it feels like all the time we're getting that kind of news, and it's the worst. But I think the biggest thing that people are talking about that's stemming from this is Shohei Ohtani's free agency. Obviously, we've been talking about it for like 2 years now, and We've been talking about the hypothetical. What does your offer look like for Shohei Ohtani for, a great pitcher and a great hitter for X amount of years? And this injury is probably going to cost him upwards of 100, maybe $200 million in total dollar value.
Yeah, I have to agree with that, and it might also cost him some years too, because when you take the pitching out of it, he's still amazing, but he's also a DH. Maybe he would. I mean, I don't think he'd be
Mhm.
thrown out in the outfield at all. Hypothetically, if he can't pitch, maybe further down the line, if he doesn't want to pitch at all, maybe he would be an outfielder. But he's a DH right now, and even if you're the best hitter, your value's sort of capped a little bit when you're a DH. Like, you're not going to get $40 million a year like Aaron Judge. It's I know Yordan Alvarez hasn't hit the open market because he got an extension early in his career, but it would look like that if Yordan Alvarez were to hit the open market right now, he'd get maybe 30 million a year like that, and that would be a great deal for him. So you know, but also with this, we're expecting Ohtani to pitch at some point again in his career. We don't know if it's next year. We don't know if it's 2 years from now, but we expect that to happen. So there is that value. However, half that value is taken away if he can't, for at least 1 year, if he can't pitch for that 1 year.
Yeah, I think, we've been talking about like $500 million contracts, even $600 million contracts, and I think all that is pretty much off the table now. He'll still get a very lucrative contract. I'm sure he'll get at the very least 300 million in total dollar value, maybe 400 million, but there's no doubt that this arm injury cost him a lot of money. And the most concerning thing about it, I don't know if you saw this, Chris, but on Twitter, there were reports that Perry Manassian, the Angels GM, said that the Angels did not check Ohtani's arm or do like a MRI or anything on him at all this year. And there have been several instances where he's been taken out of games early for very brief moments. Like he's had several like very brief day-to-day like injuries during the year. And they usually come on his start days more than anything else. So I'm very surprised the Angels did not look into this sooner, especially with what they were dealing with, even just in trade value a month ago, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's a huge mistake by the Angels there. Having the knowledge that this was going to happen, like they could have approached this a lot differently. And now we're obviously looking at a situation where they've lost Ohtani as a pitcher. They've also lost Trout as a hitter because he went back on the IL. They're 10 and a half games out of a playoff spot. It's over. Like effectively it's over. And if they had known that, I feel like they would have had a much different approach to the trade deadline. Yes, they wouldn't have gotten as much value for Shohei Ohtani if they were that concerned as a pitcher. They can't just withhold that information. But they still would have gotten a haul of top 100 prospects for him regardless.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm curious what the protocol is just generally for teams looking at pitchers' arms. And yeah, I mean, you would think there would be extra caution with a player like Ohtani who has, last year he had over 1,300 different batter pitcher interactions between him being a pitcher and being a hitter. So you want to really check on his health. So yeah, that is an interesting thing that you just brought up. But I wonder what the protocol is in general for all teams. Considering that, excuse me. But yeah, no, this is I think you're right that it does take $100 million plus off of a potential contract. I think he'll still go for a long-term deal. I don't think he's going to try to, no, he's not going to go out try to get a 1 year deal and
No, no.
try to prove his worth and whatnot. But
If anything, that might even look like a 2 year deal if he's not going to be pitching next year or going to be very limited next year.
yeah, exactly.
Which, yeah, no, you don't do that. You take the money now.
Yeah, but luckily, luckily, he is he's still been the best hitter in baseball this year, according to OPS and all that. So he's gonna get his money, but unfortunately, for him, not as much. And it's going to be a question for teams. Like, I wonder if there's some potential buyers of Ohtani before that have bowed out of the conversations. I wonder if there are more teams in on Ohtani because his value probably dropped and maybe they can afford him a little more. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see that. I'm looking forward to the reports from guys like Rosenthal and Passan to see if there was anybody that bowed out and anybody that got back in, because yeah, this throws a lot of things off in the upcoming free agent market.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. I'm very glad that as of right now, Shohei Ohtani is still hitting. Who knows how long that continues? Because the report said that he was going to continue to hit until he got his, he got further examination from doctors and advice on what to do with his UCL. But I think the one thing we can look forward to with him in terms of this season is like watching him try to hit 50 home runs. He has already qualified for the batting title. He has 561 plate appearances, and you need 502 to qualify. He's not going to qualify for ERA, unfortunately, because he was 30 innings short. He probably needed about 5 more starts or so to get there, which really sucks. But I think we are still going to remember this as a really good pitching season. He threw around the same number of innings as he did in 2021, and he had very similar numbers. He threw an inning and 2/3 more this year. He had an ERA that was almost identical. His strikeouts and walks were a little different, but his strikeout to walk ratio was actually a bit better in 2021. And he's doing even better offensively this year than he was in 2021 when he won his first MVP award. He has a higher batting average by quite a lot. He has a higher OBP, a much higher slugging, and his OPS plus is higher by almost 30 points. It's 27 points to be exact, but yeah, I mean, it is very unfortunate that we are going to see this season cut short, but it's still going to go down as, I think, his best season overall and just one of the greatest seasons that we've ever seen on a baseball field, regardless.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Like, there's there's no way he's not winning the AL MVP. If he was out for the season, if he was out for the season, he's still won MVP.
Maybe he only gets 28 first place votes.
Right. Yeah. He already has over 1,000 batter pitcher interactions, which are more than any other player is going to get this year. For sure. The league leader in plate appearances is going to have around 700. Shohei Ohtani's already at over 1,000 batter pitcher interactions, and he's been elite on the hitting side and really, really good on the pitching side as well. So yeah, I mean, that race is still over. There's not really, unless Corey Seager goes out and hits 40 more home runs in 35 games. But yeah, no, it's not, it's not going to happen. It's Shohei's to win. But yeah, I mean, anything more on the news?
No, I think that was kind of it. Yeah, it's very unfortunate, obviously, but yeah.
Speaking of unfortunate, the White Sox, well, maybe this is fortunate news, but the way they have bounced back from it is probably a little more unfortunate.
Yeah.
The White Sox this past week announced the firing of general manager Rick Hahn and team president Kenny Williams. It was kind of a long time coming, or both of their stints had been for a long time. They had both been around for the 2005 World Series championship, which, big part of their history, but it happened 18 years ago. So they've been around for a while, but they both got fired. What did you think about this whole ordeal?
Yeah, I think my thoughts are less on them getting fired and more on the replacements, and I'll get to that in a second. But I mean, this has been a disastrous year for the White Sox on all fronts, right? Last year was the underperformance overall, and at least they were able to blame it on Tony La Russa. It was an easy scapegoat, and also he had medical issues, which it made the whole thing seem very convenient for White Sox fans, for the organization. They kind of got to scrape by with accountability, I think, with all of that going on. But don't forget, like, the White Sox were like a game and a half out of the playoffs in September last year, and then they went on an 8-game losing streak, and the Guardians started streaking at that same time. So, that's a team that was very much in it to the end last year, and then everything fell apart late. And then this year they were 8-21 in April. They kind of rebounded in May, but it was just never like they've fallen off during the summer. They're 10 games below the Detroit Tigers in the standings. And no disrespect to them, they're doing much better this year than a lot of people had thought, but that's not where the White Sox pictured themselves this year. And everything has gotten infinitely worse over the last month, right? The trade deadline happens. Kenyon Middleton comes out and says, there was no leadership there. There was no like precedent set. Lance Lynn foul territory and basically confirmed it. And then there was, other things. Or Eloy Jimenez had a quote saying that, like, yeah, there's been no accountability. No one's been stepping up as that guy. And it's just an entire complete disaster.
Yeah, that is a correct word to use. Yeah, it's been an absolute disaster. Like, and it's taken place over the course of about a decade. They just missed the playoffs in 2012. I think had a bunch of last place finishes after, decided to go into full rebuild, trade a bunch of key pieces, get prospects, and a lot of those trades worked out or like looked really good at the start and worked out. And were really good, and they were set up for 2020, 2021 and beyond. And in a weak division, by the way, didn't have to really compete for much. All they had to do was sort of perform, meet expectations, not necessarily exceed them, but meet expectations. But they failed to do that pretty miserably, especially this year, along with last year, and just not put themselves in a good position at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's been bad. This doesn't even go into the reported altercation between Tim Anderson and Yasmani Grandal from before the All-Star break. I believe the report was that like Grandal was trying to leave a day early because he was not in the lineup, and Anderson like started getting physical with him, and it kind of escalated from there. But yeah, I mean, one of the things that really stood out to me about the entire accountability thing and the people that were going on media and saying stuff like that was, first of all, Jose Abreu left this year, right? I mean, I think that's the guy that kind of would have been that veteran leader. He was by far the longest tenured member of the club. And I don't even off the top of my head, who like would Tim Anderson be the most tenured guy now? The longest tenured guy? He would probably be that, right?
Yeah, he's been there since like 2016?
Something like that. And you could, maybe that says something about him, but Lance Lynn coming on and saying that, yeah, there was no accountability, that kind of concerns me because Lance Lynn should have been one of the guys that set a precedent in that clubhouse, right? Like, there's simply aren't a lot of guys that have been there a while. And, he's only been there for 3 years, but he's been in the major leagues for 12, 13 years now. I know that it's not entirely on him to be the guy to set that precedent and be accountable. That's on Pedro Gaffol more than anyone else. But like Lance Lynn is slightly responsible, in my opinion, for the clubhouse culture being what it is. And he was one of the guys saying like, yeah, it was bad over there, which I don't know. I feel like that's almost a self-report on him more than it is anything else.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's been a respected veteran for a while, and he's been in the league for over a decade. So yeah, you would expect him to try and take that leader position. But yeah, I think also you bring up a good point in the fact that Jose Abreu leaving, like that kind of hurt them because he was there for all the ugliness of the White Sox, before even before the rebuild happened. Like, he's been there for it all and has, and was there for them getting back to the playoffs in both 2020 and 2021 and was a big part of that. So yeah, I think that's a factor. Yeah, I mean, definitely not a lot of good reports out there, and especially when you consider what they're trying to do to move forward is they're making the great claim, or making the great proposition to hire from within, which seems like the exact wrong answer. It seems like Chris Getz, who was their assistant GM, is and more importantly, the director of player development is looking to be their, front runner for general manager. What are your thoughts on this?
This is my absolute favorite genre of front office mistakes is when a team that so clearly needs an overhaul entirely hires from within. I think the most recent example of this, and we covered this on the show when it happened, was the Colorado Rockies after the 2021, or was it 20? Yeah, the 2021 season. They fired Jeff Bridich, who desperately needed to go. The franchise was in a really bad spot after the Arenado trade. And what do? They bring Bill Schmidt in to be their GM, and the team, they're going to lose 100 games this year, very likely. They don't have that great of a farm system. I think they're like middle of the pack at best. I don't remember the rankings off the top of my head, but it's not encouraging. The franchise needs that franchise needed an entire overhaul. They didn't do it, and they've made no progress in 2 years. The White Sox, this is a similar situation. I know that there's talent in that clubhouse. I know that there's things that fans can be excited about with Luis Robert, with Eloy Jimenez if he can stay healthy, if Andrew Vaughn can start hitting the ball. Like they have guys, but what they need is they need a clean slate, right? It does start, in my opinion, with Jerry Reinsdorf, but that's he's not going to sell the team. Obviously, he's going to own that team until the day he dies, unfortunately. But they need a new GM. They need a new everything in the front office. They probably need a new manager, respectfully. I no disrespect to Pedro Grifol, but like after a year like this, like you just need to wipe a clean slate and start again. And I liked Rick Hahn as GM. I thought he did a good job, especially in the rebuild, right? I mean, he turned Chris Sale, Adam Eaton, and Jose Quintana into pretty much their entire core now, minus Luis Robert, right? I mean, they got Giolito out of that. They got Reynaldo Lopez out of that. They got Yohan Moncada, Michael Kopech. They got Eloy Jimenez, Dylan Cease. Like, that's all of the guys that are the names on the White Sox minus Luis Robert, like those came from trades made by Rick Hahn. It didn't come from drafting, unfortunately, which is definitely somewhere where the White Sox have fallen short. It definitely didn't come from player development, like I said, minus Luis Robert, because the White Sox, they've had a pretty bad farm system for a while, and even the good guys come from trades. They don't come from drafting and developing. So that's bad. That's unfortunate. But yeah, you need to wipe it clean. Yeah, I think the good example to use for this one would be Chris, I'll let you explain this one, but the 2011 Red Sox.
Oh yeah. 2011 Red Sox, they had a big collapse. Went 7-20 in September, blew I think a 9-game lead in the wild card. They lost it and they fired Terry Francona. Did they fire Theo Epstein or did they like mutually part ways or whatever language
Theo
they
Epstein
use?
left.
But they've got they got Bobby Valentine, which wasn't the greatest, but
yeah,
they also
I know that
they got Ben Sherrington, which I think was from within.
Did they? Yeah, I mean,
but
it is what it is. But
they changed. Yeah.
My point being, like, it doesn't matter what you have. When you are in this situation, you need an overhaul, because I think in 2012, every franchise would have taken Terry Francona and every franchise would have taken Theo Epstein, and the Red Sox were lucky to have both. But after a season like that, with clubhouse issues that were reported, with a big collapse on the field, they were in a situation where they felt like they needed an overhaul, and they got a World Series 2 years later, and they were a very competitive team with a dominant core 5 years later.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, with the White Sox, yeah, the thing that really struck me when I was reading about the whole situation was, Chris Getz, obviously he's the front runner to be GM. It hasn't been announced or anything, but those are all the reports. That's the direction it seems to be going in. And one of his roles is director of player development.
Yeah.
And player development has been one of the main weaknesses of the Chicago White Sox. You look at the top 10 draft picks that they've had, and they haven't been able to turn into much. 2016, it was Zach Collins at number 10 overall. 2018, it was Nick Madrigal. 2019, Andrew Vaughn. And they just haven't they haven't. Those were all top 10 draft picks, not just first rounders, top 10 guys that they haven't been able to figure out. And I think
Carson
that
Fulmer in 2016 too, or 2015.
yes, Carson Fulmer in 2015, he was number 8 overall. Like they obviously had talent enough to be top 10 guys. It's not like when there's that many guys that aren't working out, much of the problem is the organization. It's not necessarily all on the individual players. You can't just get unlucky that many times. I think that has to do with player development. So hiring the director of player development as your next GM seems like the worst thing in the world to do when so many of your problems have been player development.
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned, you look back at every if you go back over the last 5 years and look at the White Sox top prospects, it's guys that aren't top 100, guys that didn't turn out to be anything, or guys that just weren't even developed in the organization. It's a lot of that.
Yeah.
Which it says a lot about, especially when you went through a rebuild, right? I mean, they had a great farm system in 2018 or so, but like I mentioned earlier, that was all through trades.
Right, exactly.
Let me look back on this real quick.
Yeah, so here's what some smart teams have done. And this, I mean, part of this has to do with Jerry Reinsdorf being extremely loyal, which is a good quality, but extremely loyal to a fault. He hires from within, but it's for the fans to suffer. Like, he's good to people and he's loyal to people, but unfortunately that does not put the organization in the right direction. What smart teams have done is hired from outside and had a big overhaul. The most notable example with that is the Baltimore Orioles. After I think it was after 2019 or right before 2019, they hire Mike Elias, who was working with the Astros, who had just, garbage cans or not, they won the World Series and they were amazing at player development. And we've seen that beyond the whole scandal with how great their system has turned out players consistently year after year. So they hired Mike Elias from the Astros. The Giants, I think in 2018, before they went and had an unexpected run in 2021, and even now, they hired Farhan Zaidi. He was with the Dodgers, who were consistently year after year churning out players, doing great at player development. And if you want to use a smaller example, it hasn't quite turned out to a finished product quite yet. But the Red Sox, after firing Dave Dombrowski, they went and got Chaim Bloom from the Rays, who has improved their farm system greatly and done decent with the payroll that John Henry has allowed him. It's not as good of an example as Farhan Zaidi going from Dodgers to Giants and Mike Elias going from Astros to Orioles, but nonetheless, those are examples of how that can work. But the White Sox, unfortunately, are hiring from within, and I just don't think that's a recipe for success. They need to get someone from a good organization like the Dodgers, the Rays, even I don't know, maybe even Guardians or something like that. Someone who's done well with a low budget, or I don't know what they want to do, but they got to hire someone from a smart team.
So looking just real quick, I'm going through the MLB pipeline, White Sox top 100 draft picks, or sorry, they're the White Sox top 30 draft pick or prospects from 2018. Number 1, Eloy Jimenez, acquired through trade. Number 2, Michael Kopech, acquired through trade. Number 3, Luis Robert, legit international signing, drafted and developed through the organization, very talented. Number 4, Alec Hansen, didn't work out unfortunately. Number 5, Dylan Cease, acquired through trade. Number 6, Dane Dunning, acquired through trade. Number 7, Blake Rutherford, acquired through trade. Number 8, Jake Berger, first-round draft pick. Number 9, Zach Collins, first-round draft pick. And number 10, Carson Fulmer, first-round draft pick. And they're all close to the beginning of the first round. All three of the guys I just mentioned were top 11 overall. So those are guys that had a lot of talent coming into the organization. I think we're just naturally put there by MLB Pipeline. So Yeah, I mean that kind of goes to show you, and that's 1 year of many. I could probably go through every other year, but I'll spare you the repetition because it's going to be a lot of the same guys.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's been consistent problems with who they've selected or drafted and making them successful. Luis Robert is like the outlier, and maybe Eloy Jimenez can be thrown into that too, but
Well,
that's
no,
really it.
he was acquired through trade.
Oh yeah, I forgot. Yeah, he was with the Cubs. Yeah, Luis Robert is the outlier there.
Yeah.
Like that's like the only guy that's been able to be selected, signed / drafted and developed by the White Sox themselves and succeeding, and he's on pace to have like a 6-win season right now.
Yeah,
but
and even then, like this is his first like fully healthy, solid year that we've seen from him.
Yeah, that is
like
true.
this is the first year that he's played 100 games.
Yeah, that is true. But yeah, I mean, that's been the White Sox. I mean, it's really unfortunate. I feel really bad for the fan base, especially with all the suffering that they went through in the mid 2010s to get not really much of a reward after not really get not even get to an LCS, never mind win one and get to a World Series and win one. They got to the LDS and that was it, unfortunately. So I feel really bad, and I feel bad that they have no sense of like closure or new beginnings, because this is the same. It seems like this is going to be the same year after year, and unless Chris Getz has some different philosophy that we don't know about, but there's no reason to believe that, as he was director of player development, and look how that's worked out, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Anything
and then
more
also the other guy that they're planning on bringing in with Chris Getz reportedly is Dayton Moore.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah, that somehow makes it even worse.
It makes it even worse. And the Royals, they've won a World Series in the last decade, but other than that, it's been pretty wretched.
Okay, let's take out the World Series for a second and look at everything Dayton Moore has done since then. The Royals, let's say they started the rebuild in 2018, right? That was the year after Hosmer left. That was the year after Kane left. That was the year where a lot of their World Series core left. Mike Moustakas was traded in season. Like, let's just say 2018 was the start of their rebuild, right?
Yep.
It's still going. It's still going. The Royals won 58 games in 2018. They won 59 games in 2019. They went 26-34 in 2020. They went 74-88 in 2021. And they've taken steps back since then. 65-97 this in 2022. And then as we're recording this, 41-89 right now. So the Royals record-wise have gone nowhere with their rebuild. And oh, by the way, they have the 29th ranked farm system in the majors right now.
I was just about to fill that in. Yeah, so they don't even have any direction. They don't even have anybody coming up.
No, and it's not like, I mean, like, we have seen the development of Bobby Witt Jr. over the last month, which is excellent. We've been waiting for that for 2 years. That's kind of it.
Yeah, and also that, like,
it's not entirely it. I know that like MJ Melendez has looked a little bit better. Like they're waiting on Vinny Pasquantino to come back. Nick Prado has been injured this year, but even still, like that's not enough to contend.
And yeah, what I was about to say was, even with, like, not to discredit the organization entirely, but that's sort of supposed to happen with a number 2 draft pick out of high school. Like,
yeah, right.
Like, he's supposed to be a great player. If
it would have taken a lot to mess that up.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah. Yeah, I mean, anything more on the White Sox?
No, nothing more on the White Sox.
All right. Well, we'll get into our final bit of news, which we kind of prefaced this earlier in the year when there was an announcement of a setback with his progress to potentially come back. But Stephen Strasburg has retired from baseball officially, as he has not been on a mound in over a year. Unfortunately, has it been since 2021, or did he
He
pitch
did
last year?
pitch very briefly last year. He pitched one game.
Yeah, so he hasn't pitched consistently since 2019,
Mhm.
when he won the World Series. Pretty much won the World Series for the Nationals. He was the World Series MVP, um, a big part of that, and has officially retired. Just really unfortunate how it's been the past few years for him.
Yeah, no, this is just it's the worst kind of news. I think this makes a lot of baseball fans our age feel old because, we kind of grew up with Steven Strasburg in his prime, with the playoff shutdown in 2012. And, that was kind of a sign of we're doing it now because he's going to do so many great things going forward. And at this point, as we speak on August 26, 2023, we have seen everything that he was going to do going forward. And I think we can say that it lived up to the hype.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree. I would agree. Like, considering what he did in his career, what he did in the regular season, and especially the postseason. I mean, you can't talk about Steven Strasburg's legacy without mentioning the postseason. Uh, but also, yeah, in the regular season, he was amazing. A career 127 ERA plus in over 1,400 innings pitched. Yeah, like he he did. Yeah, he definitely lived up to it. Otherwise, the Nationals wouldn't have given him a $245 million contract.
Yeah. And we've talked about that offseason for the Nationals quite a bit. It felt like they had to have re-signed one of Strasburg or Rendon, and it turns out the correct answer would have been neither. Um,
Right.
by the time, it just felt like the right thing to do after coming off a World Series. But yeah, I mean, Steven Strasburg, he's unfortunately, I think, one of the great what ifs in baseball history now because he did, from 2010 his debut up until 2019 he was entering his 30s. And he was a guy that had a career wins above replacement around 30, around 31 actually on Baseball Reference. He was a guy that had about over 1,400 innings pitched in his career, had basically his career stats. I mean, what, like, he had 3.22 ERA, a FIP of around 3. He was on a Hall of Fame trajectory, no doubt about it.
Yeah, right, right. And he already had over 1,700 strikeouts to his resume through age 30. So he would have needed less than 1,300 to get to 3,000 eventually, which he seemed like, yeah, that seemed like the case, especially with guys like Scherzer, Verlander, even like Kershaw performing amazing into their mid and late 30s. It seemed like a major possibility. It seemed that's why no one really criticized the Nationals for paying him $245 million when it happened. Like, there was no signs pointing to this being a bad deal. Maybe it was the price was inflated a little bit because of postseason performance, but
Mhm.
it seemed like he was going to be a staple of that rotation, just like he had been a staple of that rotation about every year since 2012.
And don't forget, in 2019, the year before he signed that contract, yes, he won the World Series. Yes, he was the World Series MVP, but he also threw 209 innings that led the National League. Like, injuries might have been on the Nationals' mind. He only pitched 130 innings in 2018, and 175 the year before. And, like, he had a couple tough things here and there, but he had thrown at least 125 innings every year from 2012 up until 2019. If there were injury problems or injury worries, I don't think they were this bad.
Yeah, no, not at all. Not at all. It seemed like it developed in 2020 and beyond. And yeah, I forget the exact term. I forget. It's TOS. It's it. I know the last word of it is syndrome, but it was something where it was more than like an elbow issue or a hamstring or a oblique issue. It was like something that was affecting a large portion of the body. Felt it like in his shoulder, his back, his like everything. He could barely move. He had trouble functioning. like even just opening the door or picking up his kids. And it was a really, really big issue, which is why he has only been able to throw like 30 innings since the contract was signed, unfortunately. But like this was a major thing that I guess didn't show any symptoms before 2020.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the saddest, I think, situations that we've seen in baseball, maybe in our lifetime, like yeah, I mean, it's just a huge what if. I mean, I luckily like he did still have a legitimate prime for 7 years. He's not going to be a Hall of Famer, unfortunately, but he was on that pace for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of what made him a on track to be a Hall of Famer was his amazing postseason resume. 55 and a third innings pitched in the postseason with a 1.46 ERA. And that didn't even that wasn't all the 2019 run where they won the World Series. He was great before that. 2017 NLDS, where unfortunately for the Nationals they lost to the Cubs. Stephen Strasburg had 2 starts with 7+ innings pitched, no earned runs allowed, 10+ strikeouts, and 2 or fewer walks. And only he and Justin Verlander have done that in a single postseason series. This goes back to when the World Series started, and only he and Justin Verlander have done that in a single series. And also, Steven Strasburg in his career had 4 career postseason starts with 10+ strikeouts, 2 or fewer walks, and 1 or fewer earned run allowed. And only 4 other pitchers have 4+ career postseason starts like that. They are Justin Verlander, Cliff Lee, Bob Gibson, and Max Scherzer. So just amazing company, and he is a postseason legend, and it was cemented in 2019 when he won World Series MVP.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what makes his career so special is how he burst onto the scene in 2010, right? I mean, I think we all, even if you didn't watch it live, we've all seen like the highlights of his major league debut, that game against the Pirates, where he went 7 innings pitched, allowed 4 hits, walked no one, gave up 2 runs, and struck out 14. Struck out 14 batters.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a memory that every baseball fan has, like I mentioned, whether you watched it live or not. Everyone, it started, the playoff shutdown in 2012 started a pretty heated debate that went far beyond the baseball sphere, as I'm sure many people know about. It found its way into the US political sphere.
Yeah, yes, it did. Before we knew he was a politician.
Even I think it even went beyond that. There was so one of my friends tweeted out a couple articles from 2012 about like Rudy Giuliani and Mitch McConnell voicing their opinions on it, which was kind of wild. But
That's
that
crazy.
happened. Yeah, which I didn't even realize that ever happened, but uh yeah.
Yeah, that's nuts. Um, yeah, with Steven Strasburg, yeah, his his major league debut has it's the only MLB debut with 11+ strikeouts and no walks. And he had 14 strikeouts, so that's pretty amazing what he was able to do in that debut.
Mhm.
And yeah, he was also part of his legacy is the jump start of the Nationals, rebuild starting to come to fruition and become not a rebuild and become a consistent postseason team in 2012, 2014, 2016, 2017, and 2019. Like he was the start of it. He was the number 1 overall draft pick the year before Bryce Harper came into play, and he debuted in 2010, and he was had a consistent role from 2012 and beyond when they started going to postseason. So he was like the ray of light in the Washington Nationals franchise because of how miserable they had been pretty much since they moved to Washington. And even before that, they did not have good times in Montreal either. So he was a ray of light with that organization that they had not seen in at least a decade. So that's a lot of the reason to remember Steven Strasburg and his amazing career.
Yeah. I'll never forget watching his 2019 postseason run. Uh it was kind of one of the jumpstart conversations of ARR. Um right? I
Yeah,
mean, we talked every episode about playoff Strauss, and like you can't ever count that guy out. And the Nationals won all 4 of the games that he pitched in, including the wild card game. He pitched. Uh, uh, wait, no, I think they may have lost the. No, they did win. The Dodgers won. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. No, they won every game that he pitched in, which is crazy, including that game 6, where um he sent it to game 7. By the way, 55 innings pitched in the postseason, 71 strikeouts and 8 walks.
yeah. That's crazy. That is
That's
nuts.
nuts. That's insane.
That is insane. Yeah, an amazing strikeout to walk ratio. Yeah, I mean, unbelievable, unbelievable career. It's just unfortunate that it got cut extremely short. Did not pitch consistently past his age 30 season. But hopefully, just hoping for the best for him in life. Hopefully he just has his functionality for life beyond baseball, because that's actually a concern right now. So hopefully he can, he's able to be well, have his arm and body in check, and for the rest of his life. So yeah, I mean, now yeah, anything more before we get into players to highlight?
No, I think that's kind of it.
All right, so now we will get into our Saturday, August 26th, 2023 edition of How About That?
He's striking out less, walking more, and he's also making better contact.
Turning into a strikeout machine just out of nowhere.
He's been excellent all around this year.
He is getting a
How about that?
So my how about that is a guy that I think a lot of baseball fans probably haven't heard of at this point, but he's been arguably the best pitcher in baseball throughout the month of August. I'm talking about Cole Ragans from the Kansas City Royals. He is a recent trade deadline acquisition. He's made, I think, like 6 appearances with the Royals, and he's been dominating since the start of August. Cole Ragans leads all qualifying pitchers in FIP and FWAR. He has a 1.55 FIP and a 1.4 Fangraphs wins above replacement, and along with that, he has a 2.12 ERA. So those are excellent numbers throughout the month of August, where he's made 5 starts. Before the span, he had a strikeout rate of 21.4% and a walk rate of 12.6%. And in this span, his strikeout rate has risen to 36.4% and his walk rate has dropped to 6.6%, which means his K minus walk rate has gone from 8.8% to 29.8%, the second highest in baseball throughout that span. And one of the Royals actually made a very good addition to his arsenal. They gave him a slider. Cole Ragans had never thrown a slider in the big leagues before he was traded to the Royals from the Rangers. And since the trade, he has thrown it 13% of the time. That is the 3rd most used pitch in his arsenal. And he's had one of the best sliders in baseball over this time. His slider has a 45.1% whiff rate, the 15th highest among the 109 pitchers with at least 50 sliders thrown since the day Ragans began throwing one. And opponents have a 154 expected batting average and a 175 expected slugging against the slider. That expected batting average is the 24th lowest among the 191 pitchers with at least 10 batted balls against the slider, and the slugging ranks 11th. And throughout the year, he has a 4.5 run value per 100 on his slider, which means that for every 100 sliders he throws, he's preventing about 4.5 runs. And that 4.5 RV100 leads the 296 pitchers to have at least 25 plate appearances and on their slider. So it's not even his most commonly used pitch, but he's added it to his arsenal with the Royals. It's been an extremely effective weapon. And because of that and his other pitches, his cutter, his fastball, his curveball, he has been arguably the best pitcher in baseball since August. So that is Cole Ragans of the Kansas City Royals, a great find from JJ Piccolo, the successor to a one Dayton Moore.
Yeah. Cole Ragans.
How about that?
Yeah, he's been a swing and miss machine out of nowhere. Cole Ragans has crazy to see him leading in FWAR and FIP in the month of August. for my how about that, I am doing our first Yankee. I know
Wow.
things have not been going well in the Bronx, but for one man, he's been doing well. And I'm also, splashed because we're going reliever diving today. I'm talking about a guy by the name of Ian Hamilton, right-handed reliever for the Yankees. In the second half, he has a 1.27 ERA and 2.52 FIP in 21 and a third innings pitched. And out of 171 total pitchers with 20 plus innings pitched in the span, he is second in ERA and eighth in FIP. And out of 194 pitchers with 300 plus pitches thrown in the second half, he has the lowest expected batting average and lowest expected slugging against, while having the third lowest expected WOBA against out of 194 pitchers. Part of this has to do with him allowing far softer contact. His average exit velocity has gone from 87.5 miles per hour before the span to 83.9 miles per hour in the span. And removing bunts, out of 194 pitchers with 300 plus pitches thrown in the span, Ian Hamilton's average exit velocity against is the lowest in baseball in the second half. Also, his ground ball rate has gone from 51% to 64%. And out of 294 pitchers with 40 plus batted balls against in the second half, his ground ball rate is eighth highest. And perhaps the most daunting thing about what Ian Hamilton has done is his line drive rate has gone from 33% before the span to 9% in this span. And out of 294 pitchers, his line drive rate is the lowest in baseball. Obviously, a 9% line drive or a 9% line drive rate on a little over 40 batted balls is pretty unbelievable. Also, his sweet spot rate naturally has gone from 41% to 14% in this span. And out of 294 pitchers with 40 plus batted balls against, Ian Hamilton's sweet spot rate against is the lowest in baseball. And part of the increase in ground ball rate and decrease in, line drive rate and sweet spot rate has to do with a change in pitch mix. He's gone from using a sinker 18% of the time before the span to 28% of the time in the span. And his four-seam fastball usage has gone from 29% to 15%. So he's substituted four-seam fastballs with more sinkers, and he's gotten more ground balls. He's gotten softer contact, way less line drives, and way less batted balls in the sweet spot zone, which has resulted in him having the second best ERA out of pitchers with 20 plus innings pitched in the second half. So Ian Hamilton getting a
How about that?
And now we will go from the highest to the lows. We are talking players or subjects that have been underperforming for our Saturday, August 26th, 2023 edition of How About That?
Of How About That?
Oh, wait. Where we will get into our Saturday, August 26th, 2023 edition of Slightly Alarming Statistics. He's been barreling up the ball way less.
He's not missing bats. He's not getting the ball on the ground, and people are hitting it in the air more.
It's been so bad. He is getting a
Slightly alarming.
Yeah, so my slightly alarming is definitely a guy that anytime he's struggling, he's a candidate for slightly alarming because of how high profile he is. I'm talking about Juan Soto of the San Diego Padres, one of the best players in baseball, but since August 6th, not so much. He is slashing 132, 213, 176 for a 390 OPS and a 14 weighted runs created plus. That weighted runs created plus ranks the fourth lowest among the 177 qualifiers, and his negative 0.8 FWAR in that span is the worst. Juan Soto has been the worst qualified player in the majors by Fangraphs wins above replacement since August 6th. That is extremely alarming, if you will, but I mean, I'm sure it is just a slump. But in this span, he has a ground ball rate of 63.6%. That is the second highest among the 68 hitters with 50 batted balls. Anytime you see Juan Soto struggling, the immediate thought is ground balls, because that's what he has a habit of doing that at his lowest points, and that's absolutely what he's doing now. On that same list of 68 hitters, his 16.4% fly ball rate in this span is the sixth lowest. And of the 9 fly balls that he has hit in this span, only 2 of them have been pulled, which I know that Juan Soto is a guy with a lot of opposite field power. He's never even really been a guy that hits a lot of pulled home runs, but generally speaking, if you're hitting less pulled fly balls, you're going to see a lot less luck no matter who you are. And Juan Soto especially is going to see a lot less luck on his fly balls to the opposite way when his average exit velocity on fly balls specifically has dropped from 98 miles per hour to 95.7 miles per hour. So that's been a problem. 55.6% of his fly balls have been 39 degrees or higher in that span, which is also an issue because at 39 degrees, home runs turn into warning track fly balls, no matter how much exit velocity you have. And before this span, it was 43.1% of his fly balls that were that high in launch angle. So he's hitting his fly balls a little too high. And during the span, Juan Soto only, I say only in quotes, only has a 9.9% walk rate, which we know when Juan Soto is cooking, his walk rate is around 25%. It was 20.2% below the span, but he has sliced it in half to where it's 9.9% now. And one of the reasons why this is and why he's struggling in general is that he's actually swinging more, which Juan Soto is known for not swinging. He's incredibly good at not swinging. He's arguably the best in the league at not swinging. And I say that because before this span, Juan Soto had only swung at 34.6% of all pitches thrown to him. That was the lowest rate among the 428 hitters who saw at least 300 pitches. By the way, Juan Soto saw 2,000. So that is not cherry picked. And in this span, he has swung at 39.7% of his pitches, which you might be thinking, well, 39.7%, that's still very low. It's still going to be one of the lower rates in the league, which is correct. But his chase rate has gone from 15.4% to 19.9%. So he's swinging a lot more out of the zone. And because of that, that is one of the many reasons why he's struggling. So Juan Soto has not been himself in the month of August, and it's for these reasons.
Yeah, Juan Soto.
Slightly alarming.
Yeah, unfortunate for him and the Padres. My slightly alarming is another all-star outfielder, but his, kind of burst onto the scene this year and is, struggling on a team that is struggling now for the Texas Rangers, who are on an 8-game losing streak. But I'm talking about Adolis Garcia, who was at the All-Star game, also a home run derby participant. In his last 14 games, he is hitting 127 with a 449 OPS and 39% strikeout rate. Out of 175 qualifiers in the span, Garcia's average is second lowest, on-base percentage is eighth lowest, slugging is eighth lowest, OPS is sixth lowest, and strikeout rate is second highest. And out of 64 hitters with 250 plus pitches seen in the span, his expected batting average is the lowest, expected slugging is sixth lowest, and expected WOBA is third lowest. As I mentioned, 39% strikeout rate. His strikeout rate has gone from 25% before the span to, as I mentioned, 39% in the span. And that's because he is swinging and missing at a lot more pitches. His whiff rate has gone from 30% to 41%. And out of 138 hitters with 100 plus swings in this span, Garcia's whiff rate is the fourth highest in baseball. And a lot of hitters, they struggle more with breaking pitches to, just the league in general swings and misses at more breaking pitches. But for Garcia, it's been the four-seam fastballs. He has a 49% whiff rate on four-seam fastballs. And out of 208 hitters to swing at 25 plus four-seamers in the span, Garcia has the highest whiff rate on four-seamers. And when four-seamers are in the upper third of the strike zone and above, he has a 68% whiff rate. So if you're throwing a four-seamer to Adolis Garcia and he's swinging at it in the upper third and above, 2 out of 3 times, that's going to be a swing and miss. And he has the most swings and misses in that area of the zone on four-seamers in this span. So Adolis Garcia, he at one point I think was top like 10 in position player F4, but the past 2 to 3 weeks he's fallen off a little bit, striking out a lot more, swinging and missing a lot more, and he is getting a
Slightly alarming.
All right, so that'll do it for players to highlight. And now into a little preview of the weekend ahead. We are recording here on a Saturday, so all the series have gotten going, but we have I'll mention some of the series that you should keep your eye on for the next couple days, and Daniel will go over the day-by-day pitching matchups. A series I'm definitely keeping my eye on is Giants-Braves. Giants are fighting for a playoff spot. They've been cold a little bit, and they are facing off against the Braves. Spencer Strider dominated last night to en route to a victory in a very good pitchers duel, which was Spencer Strider versus Logan Webb, but that was last night. Another good series to watch is Red Sox Dodgers for, the obvious reasons of Mookie Betts' return, but also the Red Sox.
But also Ryan Brazier's return.
Also, yeah, Ryan Brazier's return. It's the Ricky Henderson series. It's a great matchup. Ryan Brazier's return, and Kenley and Justin Turner are facing their old teams.
Verdugo's facing his old team.
Yeah, Connor Wong facing his former organization. Just so many connections.
Wait.
And not to mention the 2018 World Series rematch, also, and 1916. Who could forget? So yeah, but also the Red Sox are only 3.5 games out of the wild card spot, so they're fighting for their playoff lives, while the Dodgers are maintaining that top spot in the NL West, and maybe even fighting for a 1 seed potentially. They're 4 games back on that. Along with that, we have the Rangers and Twins. Rangers need to get back on track. Twins trying to keep a hold of that AL Central. And another premier series to watch for the playoff races are the D-backs and Reds. Shout out to the D-backs. They've really recovered nicely and are in a playoff spot once again. And the Reds are also fighting for their playoff lives, trying to stay in that race, and even the NL Central race, because that's not over. What do you have for the day-by-day pitching matchups?
So today on Saturday, a couple of lefties going in. Guardians Blue Jays in Toronto. It's Logan Allen versus Hyunjin Ryu. Max Fried and Ryan Walker will face each other in Braves Giants. Ryan Walker has a great Baseball Savant page if you haven't seen it. More lefties. Julio Urias and James Paxton are going in Dodgers and Red Sox. Logan Gilbert will be going for the Mariners against the Royals. Yuri Perez will be going for the Marlins against the Nationals in Miami. Clark Schmidt and Tyler Glasnow will face each other in Yankees Rays. Clark Schmidt has been pretty good for the Yankees this year. Hunter Brown and Eduardo Rodriguez will face each other in Astros Tigers. Tigers had a big win last night on a walk-off. Kyle Bradish will be facing the Rockies for the Orioles in Camden today. You will have Freddie Peralta, who's had a really good month of August, pitching for the Brewers against the Padres. That is at American Family Field. Zach Wheeler will be facing the Cardinals for the Phillies in Citizens Bank Park. And matchup of the night comes from Rangers Twins. It is Max Scherzer versus Joe Ryan.
Yeah, lots of strikeouts there.
Tough day to be a ground ball in Minnesota.
Yes, indeed.
And then on Sunday, you will have Griffin Canning and David Peterson and Angels Mets. That's going to be the Peacock game. Tanner Houck will be going for the Red Sox against the Dodgers. Dodgers have yet to name their starter. Aaron Nola will be going for the Phillies against the Cardinals. Noah Syndergaard and Yusei Kikuchi will face each other in Guardians and Blue Jays. Justin Verlander will be going in Detroit against his old team for the Astros. That'll be a fun one. Carlos Rodon and Zach Littell will face each other in Yankees and Rays. Paul Blackburn and Mike Clevenger will face each other in A's White Sox in Chicago. Michael Wacha and Adrian Hauser will pitch against each other in Padres Brewers. Get ready to get housed. Graham Ashcraft will face the Diamondbacks for the Reds in Arizona. Luis Castillo will face the Royals for the Mariners at T-Mobile Park. And matchup of the day, I'm going to go back to Rangers and Twins because there honestly aren't a ton of great ones, but it's Jordan Montgomery versus Bailey Ober.
Yeah. Tough day to be a walk.
Yeah.
In that one.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, and that does it for this installment of Above Replacement Radio. We hope you enjoyed this one. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and want to watch the conversation as it happens, go to our YouTube channel, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and check out all our playlists and shorts. Check out the guest interviews. Our last one with Chris Cotillo of Mass Live, Red Sox beat reporter, and also check out the Baseball History series, where we talk 30 players and 30 teams in baseball history. We did that back in 2020, but it still remains relevant today. We hope you enjoyed this one. If you want to follow us on social media, follow me on Twitter at Chris_Gianta. Follow Daniel on both Twitter and Instagram at Daniel_Curran, and follow the show Instagram at Above Replacement Radio for all the show needs. And yeah, we hope you enjoyed this one, and we hope to see you next time, where we will be talking all the happenings in Major League Baseball once again. See you then.
This conversation is over.